Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Below the 38 podcast, Football Adventures in South Korea. This is our preview of the upcoming weekend in K-League 1, which I believe is going to be episode 20. But what is not up for debate is the fact that this is the Week 8 preview. Now, we are recording this on a Wednesday night, a couple of hours before FC Seoul travel to Munsu to take on Ulsan HD. It is currently second versus first. Now, that's obviously going to have a bearing on our show today because there's no point talking about that match because the likelihood is if you are listening to this podcast, you'll be doing so after that game has taken place. So we're going to try and skirt around that game as much as possible. But delighted, as always, to welcome Luke back to the show. He's wearing his Incheon United jersey. Presumably, he's so pumped for the closest game that Incheon can possibly play in K-League 1, or K-League 2, I guess, this weekend. Is that true?
Yeah, against any team in Korea, it would be the closest game. Bucheon were previously part of Incheon City itself in the past. We share the same area code, and it's only about 3 subway stops from the most westerly point of Incheon. So, yeah, it's very much a local derby.
Well, spoiler alert, there will be more in that game later. There always is when Luke is on the show. Anyway, Below the 38, at Below the 38, you'll find us on Twitter, Instagram, and of course here on YouTube. And our other dear host, Mike, is uploading all of these podcasts onto Spotify and iTunes, wherever else you get your podcasts. And there you should be able to find the one we recorded on Monday, which was the weekend that was. We didn't get to one of the main talking points we wanted to in that particular podcast, but we will definitely be returning to that on today's show. So have a listen out to the weekend that went up on Monday, Tuesday morning. It's now currently Wednesday, and we're recording our K-League 1 preview. And then later on this week, Mike and I will be back for the K-League 2 preview. So before we get into that talking point, which I'm really excited for, because I want to hear what your thoughts are on the scenes, the post-match scenes at the Seoul World Cup Stadium on Saturday. Let's have a look at the games that are coming up this weekend, Luke. So as I said, there is a game tonight, Wednesday, as we're recording it. It's about an hour and a half from the time that we're sitting down here. 7:30 p.m. It's Ulsan versus Seoul. It's currently second versus first. There is just basically no reason to go into this game because we don't know, again, when you're going to be listening to this, but if Seoul do win that game, they will be 6 points clear. If Ulsan win that game, they'll be level on points, having played the same number of matches. It is an enormous game. It is a pity that it has been relegated to a Wednesday night, but this game was supposed to take place on the second weekend of the season. However, Asian Champions League fixture congestion, given the K-League teams a weekend off, meant that they had to move this game. So let's move right on then to Saturday at 2 o'clock. Gangwon versus a hurting Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. Again, at time of recording, this is the meeting of 4th versus 3rd. Since avoiding relegation by the skin of their teeth, they only won 6 matches in 2023. Gangwon have become used to competing at the top end of the table, despite meager resources and a squad that I think most casual observers of K-League would be able to name too many of their players. But they're back up to 4th. They've won their last 2 matches in a row. In K-League 1, that counts as a winning streak because not too many teams are able to put together a serious number of wins. And I think because of that, matches against Jeonbuk are probably not as daunting as they may have been pre-2023. They have sort of leveled the playing field with their on-field performances. So Gangwon are a marvel, you'd have to say, in K-League 1 at the moment. Jeonbuk, on the other hand, they are ahead of Gangwon in the table, but they are going into this match on the back of a 1-0 defeat to Seoul last weekend. So, should be a good one. I really hope that's going to be a well-attended game in Gangneung. The weather looks outstanding for that one too. At the same time, FC Seoul, again, we're not going to be sure what their form is going into that match because they're playing tonight. But they are back in the Seoul World Cup Stadium to meet Daejeon at 2 o'clock on Saturday. I say when the fixture list came out for this weekend, a lot of fans might look at this as potential championship contender Daejeon against an outside, like a dark horse in FC Seoul. But the way the opening half a dozen or so weekends of the season have gone means that Daejeon are surprising everybody. They are down in 11th spot. They've won just 1 game so far. They have a very tough run of games to come up. So Wang Sung-hong, their manager, He's got 8 matches, you feel, to save his job before the World Cup means there's a break in K-League 1. Very, very interesting what's happening with Daejeon. You can also find out our take on that. We gave our thoughts on manager Hwang and what the future might hold for him on the weekend that was. Luke, myself, and Mike. And then I think the last game I'm going to be previewing for the weekend is a 4:30 kickoff on Saturday down in Jeju. Imagine being at this game, Luke. Not so much the opponent for Jeju, unfortunately, but Jeju, middle of April, the weather is so good. They're playing Gimcheon Sangmu, who are still without a win. They have 6 draws from 7 matches. 5 of those draws have been 1-1. Their solitary loss came in Sungwi Arena against Incheon. Like Gangwon, Jeju are riding a two-game winning streak, which is worth noting because of how most of the games ended a draw in this league. They didn't win any of their first 5 matches, just like Gangwon. Gimcheon, unfortunately, are a shadow of the side, which pushed Jeonbuk as far as they possibly could last season. As always happens every winter, there was a huge number of players went back to their parent clubs, and they just simply have been replaced by players of a similar standard. But they are going down. That's the other factor hanging over them this season. It doesn't matter if they finish 12th or if they finish first. As we keep saying in the show, Gimcheon are going down. What impact that has on the squad on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, we've no idea. We might find that out over the course of the season. Over to you, Luke.
Yeah, well, just to pick up there, Gangneung on a Saturday, Jeju on a Saturday, football, and then the beach on Sunday would be a perfect weekend for football. Hopefully some people get to the game and enjoy the weather. I start with Bucheon versus Incheon. It's a game which featured in K-League 2 last year. It kicks off Saturday at 4:30, and it was Incheon's first time meeting Bucheon in the league last season when we played 3 times. Incheon won 2 of the games, Bucheon won 1 of the games. I think, it's the closest we've got to a derby, and both teams need a win. There's a lot of inconsistency in both Bucheon's results recently and Incheon's results. It would be nice if Incheon could show a bit more form. Bucheon fans no doubt think the same. Bucheon have Basani expecting to miss the game. He looks to be injured again. There was talk of him being back in the squad and featuring, but for some reason he looks to be out again. Bucheon have been putting a lot of pressure on Gallego to get the goals. He's their only player, I think, that's scored more than once this season. And so it looks like it's going to be Incheon trying to deal with him while managing their own front line and seeing if they can get 3 points from the game. Big crowd is expected. Incheon away end has pretty much sold out. I think there's individual tickets left here and there. Bucheon have sold a lot of tickets, so it should be a good atmosphere Saturday afternoon. Into Sunday. Now, obviously, as we've mentioned, Ulsan are playing tonight, so we don't need to worry too much about that result. But they're playing Gwangju, which, given how Gwangju's results have been going recently, you would expect a home win for Ulsan. It's a 2:00 kickoff. And Ulsan left it late last week. They've been a bit hit and miss. They've not been putting out the best performances, but they have been picking up results. Gwangju are feeble, for want of a better word. They're getting worse each week. And they lost 5-0 to Seoul. They lost 3-0 to Gangwon. They lost 1-0 at home to Bucheon last week. I think they had 1 or 2 shots on target over the course of those 3 games. It's a really dire situation. They're under a transfer embargo. They've not got any fit players. And they could be the team that finishes bottom and forces relegation playoffs. We'll see. An intriguing game to finish off the weekend is Sunday at 4:30. Pohang have another home game, this time against Anyang. It's a game where both teams will need to get a win. They've been inconsistent in recent results. Pohang had a good result against Daejeon, and then they lost 2-0 at home to Jeju, which nobody saw coming. Anyang were winning against Gimcheon last week and conceded a 94th minute equaliser. It's a case of fighting for a bit of stability. It's fighting to be able to actually put results together because, as we've mentioned, the best winning streak in K-League 1 at the minute is 2 games, and 2 teams have that. So, intriguing set of fixtures this weekend. Hopefully, we see some wins and fewer draws.
please. If the K-League 1 gods are watching, it'd be nice to see a couple of last-minute winners like we saw in Seoul last weekend.
And a few away wins.
Yeah, I guess Anyang winning at Pohang would be nice. Guangzhou winning at Ulsan, I guess, would be pretty nice too.
Yeah.
That could be it. Speaking of that game that you're gently hinting at there, now I know you said it's the away end's not sold out. It probably will be by the time the game comes along. It doesn't really matter though, because the point I wanted to make is, and I brought this up last season on the K-League United podcast, I brought it up in written articles I did for K-League United, and I think I may have mentioned it on our own podcast this year as well. I don't understand why there's a limited number of seats available to the away fans. I know it probably sounds like a broken record at this point, but even if there is a good crowd at the Bucheon Stadium at the weekend for the meeting of Bucheon versus Incheon, it's still probably going to be like 70% empty. Would it really be such a big deal to open up another block of seats behind the goals and just have more away fans, and there's not that much of a scramble to get tickets, and then people could leisurely decide if they want to show up on game day or not? I don't know how you feel about that. It's just a recurring issue in this league where fans are locked out of stadiums that are less than half full.
I think the biggest issue is that for teams who are going to take a full allocation of away tickets, you will end up with more and more away fans going into home ends, because when you sit and watch a game on TV and the home stands are half empty and the away end is full, and we've seen it with Suwon Blue Wings in K-League 2. We saw it with the Blue Wings Jeju playoff last year. I think Jeju, credit to them, actually opened up a section for non-supporters, just people who wanted to watch, and obviously that was mostly Blue Wings. I think it seems silly if the game is oversubscribed and it's like a game, for example, in the UK or in the Premier League where there's not enough space for everybody who wants to go. I can see the point of limiting away fans. And I accept that teams in K-League don't want to turn every game into a Blue Wings home game, because K-League 2 it would be that. They already take more away fans than there are home fans anyway for most of the games, and if they're given any more seats, it would be 70, 30, 80, 20 in Blue Wings' favour. However, there's money on the table. Why are we turning down money? The Bucheon sitting areas at the side of the pitch aren't quite full, and so with that, they're not going to sell the bowl area around the stadium. So there are definitely going to be Incheon fans sitting in the Bucheon end, just as there are Blue Wings fans going into home ends, and just as there are, no doubt, Jeonbuk fans going into home ends at points as well.
Yeah, I said before.
There's money on the table.
There's money on the table, and I just think it's wrong. In a sport that also needs more people to show up, like K-League 1, like K-League 2, they need more fans to show up. Attendance is not great. When you actually stop people attending matches because there's no seats available for them in this one section, and yet the stadium is 70% empty, I just don't understand it. And then you do run the risk. I mean, I was going to say, like, was that the game last season between Songnam and Suwon? The Blue Wings in Tancheon, and obviously there's a lot of announcements on the TV saying if you're caught in the home end with an away jersey or vice versa, you'll be ejected. I think it was Paulinho scored early for the Blue Wings. A lot of people around me, they couldn't keep it together. I mean, if you are going to sneak into the home end, at least try and keep a lid on it. They didn't, and people were getting ejected from the stadium, and there were 2 or 3 segregation blocks either side of the away fans. Like, why not just put them in there? Like, what are we doing?
And we saw it with the Seoul Anyang game recently. There were Seoul fans in the Anyang end, and I mean the key thing is be smart, be quiet, and watch the game. I mean, celebrating a goal when you're in a stand that you shouldn't be in. We've all been there. We've all been in that situation, and we can control it. It's not an automatic reaction, jumping up and screaming and shouting if you know that you're not allowed to. I mean, when we watch not necessarily you because you're Irish, but when I've been watching English World Cup games at 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. and people are asleep, I know to be quiet. I mean, I watched England get to the semi-finals and the finals recently, and it was at 4 a.m. and I'm not risking waking people up at 4 a.m. So... yeah, that's something to consider.
Yeah, good stuff. I agree with all that, and I get the feeling this is a conversation we're going to be returning to several more times over the course of the season, so be prepared for that. And of course, thank you for subscribing and listening if you really want to hear our thoughts on away crowds and numbers. The match which attracts you. I will go first, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I'm going to go first. I'm going to say Pohang versus Anyang as the game which attracts me. I think at the start of the season, the obvious pick here would have been Seoul versus Daejeon, but a number of different things have happened over the course of the first 7 or 8 weeks. I'm going for Pohang versus Anyang because, like, this is still Anyang's second season in K-League 1. They're still looking to chalk off results that they've never managed before. And one of those results, of course, is beating FC Seoul at home. They've gotten the points off FC Seoul at home. They've beaten them away, but they've never beat them at home. And another landmark that they need to reach is picking up a point, even a draw against Pohang. Pohang won all 3 matches against Anyang last season. 2 of those were in the Anyang Stadium. One of them was in the Steelyard. They're going back to the Steelyard this weekend. Even before we have a look at the table, I was down in Anyang last season and I met Thomas Wedekuta and Kim Jong-yeon. I did back-to-back interviews with their players. In the lead up to that is like a preview for K-League United, in the build up to the Pohang home match, and you could tell that the form was on the ground. They were shattered, confidence was low, and I remember walking at that game thinking, Anyang are done. Like they were on such a bad run over the summer. It looked like they had nowhere to go but back to K-League 2. The following weekend, they beat Daejeon and the Citizen, then they beat FC Seoul, and they stayed up comfortably. So, for many ways, that awful home performance against Pohang, I think it was in August of 2025, that was the bottom of the barrel for them. And then after that, they rapidly rose up the table. So, I think this is a game that they need to win, not just because their position in the table is a bit precarious. They've got 4 draws out of 7. They blew a lead against Gimcheon, a 96.5-minute equaliser. They're just drawing too many games. They need to pick up wins. But unfortunately, they do have an issue with their forward line, as we've discussed sometimes before. Bruno Mata's not there anymore. And where the goals are going to come from to beat Pohang, I don't know. But they need to win. And Pohang need to win too, because after starting slowly, it looked like they picked up some wins, and now they're kind of drifting back towards mid-table obscurity again.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. And Anyang have always got a performance in them. Like, there are games where Anyang, you don't expect them to win, you don't expect them to get a result, and they grind it out. They have the players when it's down and they need to get a result. They have players to grind it out, and Pohang aren't the team that they were last year. So there's definitely an opportunity there, I think. It's a good time to be playing Pohang after last weekend. You know, it's shown that anybody can beat anybody in this league, and so I wouldn't bet against Anyang going and at least getting a point this weekend.
Okay, where do you go for it?
Predictable, but I'm going for Seoul and Daejeon. I still think, for as inconsistent as Daejeon are, I still think they have the players and they have the goals in them to get results and to win games. And as well as Seoul have been playing, a lot of their games, they've had lapses in concentration, they've given up a lot of possession, they've conceded goals that they perhaps shouldn't do. Last weekend, they did well to come away with 3 points, but they're not going to play like that and get a win in the last minute every game that they play. They're due a loss. And I think Daejeon going into this game off the back of a terrible run, and with the start that they've made, this could be the weekend that if they get a result, that everything turns around. Because you kind of look at their fixtures and it's like, this is a big fixture. This would be kind of a win that makes a statement. And Seoul are good, but they're definitely not unbeatable. So yeah, Daejeon versus Seoul, we'll see. And again, if they get turned over 3-0, if Seoul end up getting a hatful, then it leads to more questions about what's happening with Daejeon. I just think it's an interesting game, and however the results go, there's a lot of talking points to come out of it.
Yeah, the table is a table. Obviously, I know it's a very obvious thing to say, but there's no doubt that Daejeon are better than 11th. I mean, even their most fiercest rival would not say that they're the 11th best team in K-League 1. They have far too many players to be where they are, so I think it is only a matter of time. Even if they don't make a managerial change, it's only a matter of time before they start jumping up the table. I agree with you on FC Seoul as well. I was there. I've seen them 2 weekends in a row, and I saw them power past Anyang in the first half in Anyang Stadium, and then hang on. And they were lucky. I still think they were lucky to come out of Anyang with a point after the home team equalised about 10 minutes to go, and they were on the ropes for a lot of the game against Jeonbuk, especially in that first half. Jeonbuk thought they had a penalty. I still think that was a penalty, even if it was soft. He still clipped Kim Dong-jun, and then they had what they thought was a legitimate goal ruled out about a minute before Seoul scored themselves. But they do have Patrick Klamala. You're talking about goals. They have Patrick Klamala, and again, I think we talked about it before. There's a reason why he was injured since he arrived last season, but they kept him. The easy thing to do would have been to get rid of him, like a lot of clubs do that with foreign players that come over. They don't want to pay the money to sit in the medical room, but they knew he was worth keeping, and he's already repaying their faith in him. Yep. Yeah. There's a couple. The usual demons. Yes. Go on. Sorry. Go on.
I'm going to say it's interesting, and I think Ju Min-gyu as well, you can't rule out him getting a few goals. He's very good at being in the right place at the right time. He proved that last year. Like, Ulsan let go of him because he's getting on a bit. They let go of Ludwigsen because he's getting on a bit. But you'd take both of those players in most K-League 1 squads. I don't know that there's many K-League 1 teams who would turn those players down. So yeah, they've got a lot of good players. It's just a case of, like we've mentioned, finding how to play and getting everybody playing together on the same sheet. So we'll see this weekend. Right,
now I'm looking forward to this one. So the nice talking point that we wanted to talk about on Monday's show, but there were issues with our connection, I think, or our space. I don't know. There was lots of things. I had a baby crying. Everything went against us on Monday, but we are going to jump into this one now. So seasoned K-League followers are probably aware at this point that they've seen the weekend images of 3 former Jeonbuk players serenaded by a chorus of boos from the away end after FC Seoul beat Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors 1-0 on Saturday. The boos were also accompanied by a large banner reading Judas's. Now, not every fan was engaged in this, of course, but it was still a sizable number. There were, of course, some fans applauding their 3 former players, but there were also a sizable number who weren't. So a little bit of context first, before I get Luke's opinions on this. The 3 players were Kim Jin-soo. He is a local lad. Until he moved to FC Seoul at the beginning of last season, he'd only ever played for Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. He has 160 appearances for the club. Moon San-min, he is from Seoul, but he has lined up 137 times for Jeonbuk and been incredibly successful in doing so. And then there's Seoul's big winter recruit just gone by, which is Song Min-gyu. He's also from Seoul, and he featured 132 times in the green of Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. And it's also been widely reported in various news outlets that Song's wife received death threats and apparently messages of a graphic sexual nature too. This is all absolutely appalling stuff. We will talk about that in the second part of this, what I want to ask you. The first thing I want to ask you, though, is in K-League, I think it's quite unique. I don't know if they do this in Japan or China. They certainly don't do this where I'm from, unless it's like a hero returning. But even a player who has represented a club 7 times a decade ago, when he faces that club again, he will go and applaud the fans after the game. And normally after every single match in K-League, there's one player from this team, at least one player from this team, one player from this team, and they're going to the opposite end to applaud their former fans. Some of those players have 200 appearances for that club. Some of them have 7. So, do you like this culture, I guess, of applauding former players? And then, at what point do you think, if you do like it, at what point do you think enough is enough? Because Kim Jin-soo and Moon San-min, this is their 2nd season out of Jeonbuk. So, do you think they need to keep doing this?
I like it to an extent. I think players, if you've played regularly, like over the course of a season or beyond a season for a team, then it's nice for you to go back. And in my experience, the majority of players who come to Incheon's fans are applauded. I think as well it depends on how the players left the club and where they go after. for Moon Sun Min particularly, and I think Kim Jinsu, who's actually like a local boy down in Jeonbuk, you would expect that they would have to go every time they play Jeonbuk, whoever they're playing for, because the way that things work in Korea, if they don't, then they'll be like shouted down and criticized for not going and applauding and showing thanks. I mean, Moon Sun Min comes over to the Incheon fans and applauds, even though he plays for Seoul, even though he left us to go to Jeonbuk, he still comes over. And I would say 80% of the reaction is polite applause. With other players that have left Incheon, especially if they've not left under a cloud, then yeah, generally everybody applauds regardless of how long it's been, or if they were even just a lone player, they get applause. 2 weekends ago, I saw Incheon players going over and clapping to the half a dozen Gimcheon fans who made the journey up, that seems like a strange one because everybody has to go for army service, but Kim Dong-hun gave his shirt to somebody in the Gimcheon end, which seems a bit excessive, but I like it. I think it's polite, and it reminds us that actually what we're watching is a game and it's a sport, and that some of the things you mentioned earlier with Sung Min-gyu and his wife are entirely inappropriate and have no place in the league, in football, in sport generally.
Yeah, we'll definitely circle back to that side of the story. I mean, booing and holding up a sign that says Judas is like really, who cares? That those players are incredibly successful. They have great memories, I'm sure, of their time in Jeonbuk. You could see by the reaction to the goal and the final whistle how much it meant, especially to Kim Jin-soo and Sung Min-gyu. And then I also have part of a video I took at the weekend. You could see Moon Sun Min riling up in a positive way, the home fans, while they're waiting for the referee to give this goal is definitely standing. So they obviously had a great career in Jeonbuk, and they had and now they're obviously joining themselves in Seoul. So before the messages that Sung Min-gyu's wife is alleged to have received, and again, this is widely reported, do you think the Jeonbuk fans were right to hold up banners that said Judas's, and do you think they were right to give middle fingers? Do you think they were right to boo three players who gave everything, the best of their careers were given to Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors? Don't forget.
Can I just confirm before I answer, is this the Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors who spent 10 years stealing everybody's best players, and literally any time anybody was any good or played well against them, they signed them? Is this the same Jeonbuk who steals everybody's players?
Yeah, if you're confused, go onto Wikipedia and click almost all of their best players and see career history, and that'll be the answer to Luke's question.
Yeah. I mean, like, we have sold players to Jeonbuk. We've had players move to Jeonbuk under a cloud, Moon Sun Min being one. I don't want to speculate, but there was a lot of discussion regarding finances and money in that move. One of our best young players a few years ago when we were in the Champions League was Cheo Jin. He ended up moving to Jeonbuk, and I think his first year he barely played. They've got a long history. I mean, who did Jeonbuk sign in the summer?
Yeah, Oberdan. I mean, Oberdan's a great example of this. Where did he come from?
He came from Pohang, right? So he was really, really good at Pohang. He controlled Pohang's midfield, and they signed him. Do you think Pohang will have Judas's banners up? Probably not. I think there's an element of class in it. I think there's an element of it just being very distasteful. I get that people are not happy that they moved to Seoul, but you also have to remember that Korean football exists in somewhat of a bubble. Korean players play in K-League, and if they're not young enough to move to Europe, there's not really many other places for them to go. So there are so many into K-League transfers. The majority of players spend all of their time playing in K-League 1, which up until this season has 12 teams. So what are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? It's a job. They're on a contract. If they have chance to move to the capital city and move out to the countryside that is Jeonbuk, then they're probably going to go. And when they feel that they've achieved everything they can, or that the manager changing might limit their appearances this season, there are so many different factors involved in this. But I think just having a banner that says Judas's aimed at people who've played over 100 times for you, won the double with you, having had you come from nearly bottom of the league the season previous, I think it's distasteful, and I think it's it's kind of almost ironic that it's Jeonbuk doing this.
Yeah, I agree.
The club.
Yeah, again, I mean, from a Blue Wings point of view, they lost 2 key players just after relegation to Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors, and like historically, Seoul and Suwon were Jeonbuk's biggest rivals. As Seoul and Suwon both declined, they kind of moved on to Ulsan and I guess Pohang for a bit. I mean, I remember reading some articles that K-League United about before. It was a one-way road from Pohang to Jeonbuk to Jeonju in terms of talent. It went in one direction. So yeah, just as a Sung Min-gyu joined Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors from Pohang Steelers as well. This is the nature of football, and like he was on the pitch with his wife in front of the fans in the same pitch in front of the same section, celebrating a double. And what a great way to go out. And like whatever about Kim Jin-soo and Moon Sun-min, I mean, they're both now at the tail ends of their careers. Like once they left, Jeonbuk went on and won a double. It's not like this has dropped Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors in a very awkward situation where suddenly they've gone from the best team in the country down to nearly fighting relegation. I mean, it's extraordinary stuff.
It's just a sense of entitlement from a team that is too used to winning and getting their own way, I think.
But the big,
it's one of
Well, I guess the big issue though is not that. I mean, it doesn't bother me so much because you forget about that. It's more when you see the reports afterwards of Sung Min-gyu's wife. It's like the death threats. Or it's like the racist comments that people leave on Instagram and other social media accounts. Look, it's if Suwon are playing against Incheon, it's 11 versus 11. We can love beating your team or beating that guy's team or that girl's team more than any other team, but it's just a game of football at the end of the day. It's just, I said, it's 11 versus 11. It's supposed to be fun. It is entertainment at the end of the day. If you're going to stoop to racial slurs or death threats or send messages that are considered sexual harassment, then just find a new hobby. Go away. The league and football in general doesn't need you, and we're all better off without your existence.
Hopefully the police do their jobs.
So that was the big one. That was the big talking point of the weekends. And it probably paved over what was an average enough match, just with a sensational finish. But it's always good to have talking points, but that's not a talking point that we're looking for. So games that we're going to the weekend, I'll let you go first. You teased our listeners earlier on with it. Come on, what is the name of this derby? And
it's the 032 derby.
Why is that?
The slogan for it is same area code, different class, I believe. And yeah, I managed to get tickets. I managed to get tickets despite a 20-minute error message or mess up or something on the ticket server. There was a lot of reports online of people not being able to get tickets, being frozen out on the payment screens and everything else. But finally, we got tickets, and it's just, as I say, individual tickets remain. I think there's about a couple of dozen individual tickets, so it should be a good turnout from Incheon. Yeah,
the payment screen's always a nightmare. As somebody who's been trying to buy KBO tickets for a decade, it's just you think you're there, and then it freezes, and you're gone. And you were number 1,800 in line, whatever it was, and then you go back in and suddenly you're number 6,732. It's an absolute nightmare. I will be at that game is on Saturday, isn't it? That's the 4:30 Saturday game.
Saturday 4:30. Yeah.
Yeah, not too bad. At least it's just down the road too. You're not traveling to Jeju or Gimcheon or something like that. I will be at an unusual game. I'm going to see the Blue Wings Legends against the Manchester United Legends. But they're not called that. I think I've already forgotten what the name of this Man United team is. It's like OGFC. Yeah. OGFC, and like Patrice Evra's coming, Edwin van der Sar is coming, Berbatov, Saha, Ryan Giggs. From an Irishman's point of view, John O'Shea and Darren Gibson will be there. Anderson will be there. I'm trying to think who else I haven't named.
The Raphael and Fabio twins.
Yeah, they are. Mikael Sylvester's coming. They're going to be managed by Eric Cantona. Now, I'll be doing media for this one, so I got the email from the organisers yesterday, which had their flight numbers, arrival time, and what terminal they're in. I was kind of wondering how, when you're watching the news over here, fans just seem to know when people are arriving at Incheon Airport, and maybe there's just a bunch of journalists who are releasing this information, and now fans know when Eric Cantona or Patrice Evra is going to be showing up.
Incheon in the winter when they were flying to Spain and flying back from Spain, Incheon did actually post the flight codes, and there were people live streaming from the airport watching people get their luggage off the big bus. And I don't know, it's like when I want to check in to a flight, the last thing I want to do is kind of be surrounded by people who aren't traveling. Whatever the situation is. Anyway, yeah, so hopefully 2 games with lots of goals.
Yeah, I get the feeling there'll be lots of goals in my game. It's obviously a kickabout, and most of the players are arriving on Saturday, so they're going to be jet lagged. Your game will have spite to it, obviously. Hopefully the right amount, both on and off the field. A proper derby.
Hopefully no trouble.
Doesn't need to go anywhere else. Luxton, thanks very much for that. We'll catch up with you on Monday for the weekend that was, Luke, and myself, Andrew. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.